Okay, I think I am live yet again, like a minute late, but maybe this is getting better. Like the lateness is getting shorter and shorter. Um, like I am more on time than not on time. That's bizarre. Maybe this is definitely setting the energy for the stream today, for sure. Um, so I guess one of the reasons about lateness was especially today, I've had to do a lot of tab cleanup when I share my screen for the open source contributions because in fact I need to save a file and then close it just in case I end up showing it on stream by accident. So let me just do that and quit that program. Awesome. So yeah, the tricky thing about working on sensitive projects sometimes is I don't want to accidentally show sensitive projects on stream, and that's always the risk. When you got various things on the go for work and otherwise, because these streams are not work related, they are not to do with my job, so I have to make sure that I am very careful there, and that I set some boundaries between my streaming open source life and my work life. So that seems to all be, let me see, that seems to all be closed. Let me not show my bookmark bar, and let's get the GitHub open for when we share screens, and we'll kind of start off with, I think one of the things that I want to do on stream today as well is update some of the open source design spreadsheets. Maybe we will also find some other things that inevitably need doing for open source design, and also, not that this is open source related, but my cats have been driving me bananas this morning. One of them is consistently wanting to come in and out of like the house, via any available openable like door or window, and the other one has now developed a habit of making like messes on the floor, which we won't go into because it's gross. So every morning there is something to clean up and something to try and behavior correct. So hey, difficult. Animals are tricky, especially when they're old. Like the one that's making messes on the floor is a very old cat, so to some extent you can't really blame him. Okay, jobs board. Where's the jobs board spreadsheet gone? It's got to be somewhere in here. If it's not, then I'm worried. Hmm. Because I don't remember. Oh, this is an old PhD thing. I don't remember. I I don't think oh, there it is. I found it now. I was like, actually, this has reminded me I should probably make a backup of the open source design board, because the spreadsheet is hosted on Google Spreadsheets at the moment, and that's probably not the wisest place to place it. So we have three things that I think we want to try and achieve on stream today. The general, let's look through look through any open PRs and see what we can close. So, which is like our business as usual maintainer stuff. We'll also do some updating to the open source design jobs spreadsheet that we have here, and maybe talk a little bit more about why we maintain this spreadsheet and what the maintenance of this spreadsheet is for and useful for. And then the other thing that I would really like to do on stream, if we get round to it, well, there's actually another, the other two things. So continuing some of this open source design curriculum or education would be good, which I recently finished there's a forgot what they call them on Coursera, but there's a specialization, I think they call them. There's this course essentially that I believe is organized by the Linux Foundation, it looks like. So let's head back there. Oh, okay, so it takes you there. So let's go back to this URL, Linux for Developers. Here we go. So sometimes I find the Coursera interface very, very difficult to navigate, but I did one of these. I did like the Introduction to Open Source course. So it's got 4 different like courses with different modules in it, and one of the first course is, let's look, view all course modules. Oh, 5 modules. So this is a little bit different than what I did. Linux orientation, starting to work with Linux. So this is their Linux for Developers. This course is part of, here we go. So this is the specialization. So this is where I get confused with Coursera. So there are courses within a specialization, which is almost like a collection of courses, and then within the courses of the specialization, there's modules. So this specialization is the idea. The Linux Foundation logo is so small here. I think the idea is to learn how to develop open source software, get the skills and knowledge you need to develop open source using Linux, Git, and more. So obviously it's going to have a focus towards Linux and Git and all that kind of stuff. But let's have a look at the courses. So I think this is the one that I did. The 4-hour course, open source development methods. Let's see. Yeah, already enrolled, beginner level. Let's actually just go to the course and see whether it's the one that I ended up completing. Yes. So, and I got a certificate. Well, I'll get a certificate if I want to pay for Coursera, essentially, which is funny. But it gives you like the next course, your progress in this specialization. So the next course, I believe, is like going into more developer related things. But I did this first part of the course, like open source software development methods. And the main reason that I did it was I was curious, essentially. I was curious about what content goes into like a 4-hour introductory course on like open source software. And I feel like it's going to help me better understand like what it already has helped me better understand what parts of that content I feel like would be good content for somebody that doesn't intend to contribute code as their primary contribution or contribute it at all, but which parts of this course could be and would be useful for a non-code contributor in some kind of curriculum. So the second thing that we're going to maybe look at doing on stream, if we get time from the regular maintenance stuff, is that. And then the very last thing is sort of semi-work related, semi-open source. Sometimes the lines are blurry between work and open source contributions here. Here at in Errol's Brain, we've got this repository hosted by Superbloom, which was created last year for the workshops for COSCUP. COSCUP is a a big open source conference hosted in Taiwan. And we didn't, we created it last year and for the workshops with the intention that if somebody wanted to upload any content that they created at the workshop, they could upload it there. So if they, the people from the workshop last year ended up doing a lot of paper-based work, like so physical drawings and writing on paper. And we documented those, and also people used a HackMD text file to talk about their projects. But if people basically wanted to start a folder and upload anything to this repository, they were able to. What we're going to use this repository for this workshop this year for the workshop is we're actually going to go ahead and upload all of the different kinds of resources, like the templates that we have for the design related workshop. So we've got like all of these different templates that we've created as possibilities for what to do, what designers can contribute to issues in the workshop, and we're gonna prepare essentially this repository with all of those templates and all of those pieces of information, just so we are not like biasing towards like Miro as a tool for like where our information and processes and templates are for our open source work. So that is possibly something that we'll end up doing on stream. So there's a number of different issues that I created actually and just assigned to myself. So I need to work on the discussions tab. I need to upload all of the user research that we have at the moment. Some of it's still potentially due some changes maybe. But we can always upload different versions of the user research for the open source tools that we have. We need to upload all the templates for the workshop if people want to use those, and I wanted to like write a markdown, maybe I think a folder for each of the potential tools that people can work on. So there's three different tools that people can choose to work on issues for, and there's 2 issues per tool that groups of designers can focus like their contributions on. So I'm thinking about making like a folder for each like tool, open source tool, and then like markdown text files that explain what that tool is, where they can find out more information about the tool like online, so different links and stuff. And then basically just any guidance to do with the open source tools. And then, so what other issues have we got that I've written? Oh yeah, so guidance for downloading using the open source tools. So if the people that have signed up for the workshop, which is I believe already full, people have already I was told like the other week by the person, the contact that we have at COSCUP, that sign-ups for the workshop are already full, which is somewhat like surprising in an incredibly pleasant way. Like it sort of shows that when you make space for non-coders or people that don't want to prioritize code as their contributions for open source, or are curious about any other kinds of contributions they can make to open source that are not necessarily code. When you make space for it, enough people are interested, regardless of however they intend to identify, like whether they're designers or otherwise, essentially. And I think that's always really interesting, because I think that often when it's definitely changed over the last like 5 or 6 years, because like when I was first doing like design contributions in open source software, back in like 2017, 2018, and then pitching to do talks and panels and like make space for designers at open source conferences. It was like very, very much like the response was, are there going to be enough people interested in that? And I think that I've seen such a change in the sort of 6 years from when I first started doing contributions in open source. Not that, you know, other people have been doing design contributions in open source way longer than I have. So I'm sure they've also seen like a drastic change happen, like a shift. But yeah, it sort of really demonstrates that even if people sign up to something, hey Bruno, even if people sign up to something and then maybe they can't make it, I think that that's also like a sign that that people are interested in it. Anyway, so that's what we're gonna try and work on today in the hour stream that we have. We're still doing hour-long streams mostly because I'm working myself up to 2-hour-long streams again, and I'm also trying to get out of the house more, so that I'm not always at my computer doing open source stuff. Hey CB. Two very cool people in the chat. Bruno, CB, if you're both still here, you're both excellent people. If you've never met each other, then please consider this my on-stream introduction of each other to each other. I actually wouldn't. I was about to attempt to try and describe what each of you do in your sort of general like roles. You're both like techie developer software engineers, but I think that you do I think that you work on vastly kind of different things, although maybe not, but you're both my cool, two of my cool techie friends. Anyway, right, let's try and do some maintenance, shall we? I'm a sweaty mess in my current role. Oh no. I hope that's not too difficult. I haven't heard much about what's been going on in your day job, I suppose. I remember I was watching your stream, your Armored Core stream, and then like seeing you do the be right back. I've been like, you know, you're on call for like problems. I was like, on call problems. I've just been fixing something in my server cupboard, which involved rebooting the whole internet. Oh, no promotion, thank you very much. I love it when we get bots in the chat because I learn a lot about how bots operate. Thank you so much, CB. Moderator extraordinaire. I feel like I need to keep like once I learn how to do like Twitch like things like reactions and animations and stuff, one day I'll learn how to do those things. I think for every time moderator CB is awesome, we'll have like a animation. I'm sure I'd given you a VIP badge, which is pink, and you came in with a blue Prime badge. Interesting. Oh, right. Oh, thank you very much. I need to learn how to do all those things. I haven't had much time to kind of really learn what beyond like making the streams go live and happen. Yeah, I'm not really sure how to. I would love to learn how to make like all the snazzy things happen in streams. Maybe there's a Coursera course for for learning how to become a super cool Twitch streamer. But hey, here I am learning about open source governance models. So maybe one oh, thank you very much. I like bells and whistles though. I think that's my nerdy thing. Is I get like things that you can do with automation and all that kind of stuff. I think is quite fun. Um, I'd like to learn how to do it, and then maybe have the option of choosing whether or not it's a thing within my stream. Um, so like I'm actually like really interested in like talking about my experience of going through this module with the open source development methods. So let's get through the maintenance stuff really quickly. Um, and then go talk about that course, because there were several things within the course that you know I guess like when you like start something and you're like, I wonder if this course is or this content is going to lean into a particular narrative, or like everything has a certain like bias or perspective, and this course was created by the Linux Foundation, so therefore it's going to have a what's the word, leaning towards the Linux Foundation's intentions. But yeah, there were certainly some really interesting things, especially within the quizzes. Like the quiz questions were really interesting. Oh, thanks for the follow. It's me, Cami. Hi. I love now that I'm learning the noises for follows and when things happen. Thank you very much for helping me on my continuous Twitch learning journey. But some of the quiz questions around these open source, like this introduction to open source, I hope that I can maybe find them on stream, because they were very like, it sort of depends, like, right, it feels like it would depend on what you value and how you came to open source software. So like if I remember correctly, there was one quiz, there was quite a few sections of this course that really dealt with like which kind of makes me think about how common this is maybe in open source, that two sections I think of this course really focused on what happens when you receive like an unpleasant comment when you're doing open source. So like essentially like there were these two sections that were like, if somebody you submit a PR and somebody reviews your PR and says that it's wrong, what do you do? And it's like a multiple choice sort of some of them are like multiple choice radio buttons, and some of them are multiple choice check boxes, and sometimes the quizzes are like, select one answer or select all that apply. And there were like sort of answers that were like to that question, which were like some way of like, you fight them, essentially fight them in the comments, like you throw down, which I shouldn't laugh about, because this does happen in open source and it's profoundly unpleasant when you come across it. So there was like some form of fight them. There was like some form of the answer which was like you correct them, which actually might have also been part of the fight them. Like the fight them answer. There was one answer which was like ignore the potential like hurtful part of the comments, or what could be like interpreted as harsh. Ignore that, and just focus on the technical issues. And then there were other answers. And I remember thinking and reading those things, it's like, what is this course trying to teach you ahead of like open source contributions, in the sense that like it's that kind of view of open source software contributions and open source generally, which is very much like, it's all about the technical stuff. It's all like technical, like correctness is the pinnacle of the most successful or good open source experience. And like it neglects the a lot of people come to open source software for the cultural community, learning, growth, camaraderie, shared enthusiasm around a language, a tool, a something. Like it neglects that some people are not just there for like the technical correctness, and some people are not even there for the technical correctness. They're about like developing another part of the open source experience. But obviously, you know, it's a open source software development methods course, so it's not an open source community growth course. It's not an open source health course. It's like very like it's very specifically like development methods. But then I think the tricky thing is like about how then it creates that separation between like the code development aspects of open source and then the cultural aspects of open source. So as you can tell, I have a lot of thoughts about this course that I completed. I ended up I'm not gonna lie, I ended up completing it in like probably like I did like the first section module, and then I had like maybe a week and a half of not looking at it, and then I finished it all the rest of the modules in like a Saturday. CP. I love some of your comments in the stream because they are like, they start off as like and then they like end on like a hilarious like self-deprecating or open source software deprecating like joke, which is needed. It gives the needed brevity to the seriousness of it. But I remember, so I remember when I was trying to finish off the course, because I was really curious as to what the entirety of the content would be. I was doing the thing where I was like, I opened up the graded quiz, like the multiple choice like questions, and like listened and watched the videos in tandem, because some of these online courses like try to make you work harder for the grades. Like they try and like not they will word the questions in the quiz more abstractly than the content. But this did not. This course, like the questions were almost like verbatim, like what gets covered in the videos. So because the videos have transcripts as well, you can actually like. So for one thing that I wasn't sure of off the top of my head was between a choice of 4 different open source projects, which one was copyleft, and which one which one was copyleft and which ones weren't. And I think that the 2 of the choices that I was stuck between, or the 2 choices were GPL and BSD. And I was like, it might be, there were other questions to do with GPL and BSD as well, so I'm not 100% sure which of these questions I had this thing with, because there was another question about GPL and BSD around which ones follow like a governance board model and which ones follow a benevolent dictator for life. So one of them, I can't, maybe I'm getting mixed up with the questions, but there was like a question where like which of these projects is copyleft and which is not. And so I just, did the search and find in the transcript for like BSD to find out which were copyleft or not. But I'm pretty sure it was in the course content, which was there's a whole section that's on licensing. So like there's like the introductory and history, and then like advantages. One of the advantages why you use open source software quiz is quite funny. Like in the if you're like funny in a way that if you are already part of open source software, you will have opinions on this. But if you're imagining that you're like one of your first touchstones to open source contribution is this course, it could like actually help you kind of frame your mind differently. But like, you know, some of the answers, the potential answers for that were like many hands make light work, essentially. And again, depending on what open source software project you're part of, many hands may not make light work. Many hands may make an incredible amount of backlog. So, like, there is the thing about like with what is it? With many eyes come bugs are easier to solve with more people. Like the more eyes you have on a bug, then the more likely it is to be solved than a single person. But hey, anyway, so yeah, I would recommend if anybody has like a spare, I don't know, like I think some people could whiz through this in an hour or maybe even 2 hours. But like if anyone has spare time to go through it, I would really like recommend going through it because it is quite fascinating. Um, here's the link to the Coursera course, just because it is a fascinating like exercise if you're an open source a nerd, or not an open source nerd, honestly. So yeah, back to the maintenance. So this person never replied. This maintainer never replied. So let's close this. And I said I'd wait a week, and then I've ended up waiting 2 weeks. So, okay. So no reply received. Closing this job PR. Oh, I spelled received incorrectly. There we go. Okie dokie, so we're out of that. We also recently, I think, merged a pretty cool job here from AntennaPod. Actually, I didn't read what so they want a UI UX review of AntennaPod, the AntennaPod player screen, which I believe AntennaPod is like a open source podcast app for Android. An alternative to all of the proprietary or like company owned podcast listening things. But I love this job because it's a real like it's a really great example of this is a job worded by like a team that need a problem solved. Like, so their design problem is that they've got like a lot of different functionalities, they've got a load of features, they need to be accessible from a certain screen, we need to find a way to do that, but we also want to make it user friendly. But like, it's a great example of also the wording of the job probably would make most designers cringe, to say the least, because like UI UX review of the player screen, perfectly fine, and then the brackets to fit more features is probably one of the worst things that you can probably say to like a designer that's like it's not necessarily like really bad, like, right, it is what it is. Like, I would rather some open source software project say that than not say it at all. But yeah, it's kind of like the do some design to make this busy UI look better, and it's not, it's like that foreshadowing for like, it's, yeah, design isn't a magic wand. You can't all of a sudden, like, well, it's not always a magic wand. Like, sometimes design can do things like that are kind of revolutionary for like a interface, which is lovely. But yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, it's making an assumption that the problem is that there's not enough space on the screen for all of the things that we want to do, Whereas one of the real problems that they might find the designer brings is, why do you think that all of these features need to be on this screen for everyone? And actually, like, some of the approach to this might be something to like progressive enhancement for certain users, or it might be like configuring. Like ultimately, it might be about like, can you offer the users an option to configure what they see on the player screen, like what's important to them? And if the answer is no, we can't do that, that's too much, then it's like, well, you're going to end up with a busy UI. Like, if that's the... it's kind of already setting like a ceiling for what is possible. We want to put all the features in the screen, as opposed to we want to find the best way to give the right features to the users that want them. That's kind of how I would word the fit more features differently. But anyway, but I love that this is here, and I love that this wording exists. Like, I would never discourage like a open source project developer or otherwise, like, use the words which feel appropriate for describing the problem, because then it helps us get to the root of the problem better. So yeah, love this. We also really need to, I think, did I add an issue to add the license to the jobs? So when people submit a job, oh, actually, did this get, yeah, it got merged, awesome. So one of our contributors wrote this really lovely like guidance on how to do a successful job post, which is really cool. But the only thing that I feel like is missing from our jobs form is we found over the years that a lot of people, a lot of projects that maybe hadn't yet chosen a license, or even projects that weren't ever really intending to be open source. There were a couple of submissions to our jobs forum at one point that were just like straight up like not open source projects, and they thought, oh, open source design means I can get free design work, which is, a half truth. But the criteria for posting a job to the open source design jobs board is that you are maintaining work on or have some kind of decision making power within an open source project, and then you can ask for help. So we started rejecting jobs that were clearly not open source, but what we don't offer in the form is like an explicit form element which asks for a link to your license, but that is indeed what we end up looking for before we merge a job as like being public on our website. So we should really think about putting in a specific form for it, because you could put it in the relevant links, contribution page, existing design work, project wiki, blog. But if it's that important that it will either like it's so important that it's one of the reasons why we might reject or merge, it should have its own form element. So I guess do not open issues here, so I don't think I would want to open that issue there. But I do think the form is hosted on the jobs repository, right? Job form, yeah, here we go. Job template, job form. Let's have a little quick look at the HTML here. Yeah. So we've got submit a job. Sorry, I make some noises sometimes that when I'm doing the maintenance, that I'll try to not make weird noises so much. Yeah, okay, cool. So maybe one of the contributions we can make here is a change to the jobs board, because So I guess one of the tricky things about open source design in general is we don't really necessarily have a clear um, process for uh, submitting like a PR. Like I feel like I want to create an issue before I do a PR to change that. That feels like a good process to me. We're here for the oral experience. Delightful. Yay, I'm glad. I'm glad. Um, these are all the things that go on in my head when I'm trying to do open source work. So let's I think that's the way the job page works. Gosh, I remember, yeah, this is an epic to do with it. But this doesn't include an issue to do with the adding a form field for it. Oh, good grief. Good grief, we started our landing page redesign back in 2019. It's got 44 comments. So this is just a great example of not even designers can decide on like what design to choose for a landing page. So it's the activity from homepage. I should really go through quite a lot of like these issues and close any that are no longer relevant, to be honest, or announce when I should. So I think I ended up doing this issue. Mastodon account isn't listed on the website. So this person said that our Mastodon account isn't listed on the website, the Open Collective, or the forum. So I remember I had a real tricky time adding the Mastodon to the actual website, mostly because it's a static site generator. I think we're still using Jekyll for the existing site. So Jekyll websites have like this YAML file where you can define certain social media things, but because I think Jekyll isn't super well supported anymore, I don't think that they had updated like the like I don't know whether you could define it there and then have like, because if you define a social media profile in the YAML file and say it's like an old social media, not that Mastodon isn't old, I suppose, but like if it was the Twitter or the YouTube or something that's been around a while, then it would pull like things like I think the icon in from like somewhere already existing. But it looks like it's here. Is it working though? That's the main thing. Yeah, it's there. It works. I haven't done the testing for this, so let's say that this is the testing phase. Perfect. It's there. It's there, and it's there, and it works. So we have testing. Tested the links on the website. They work. And then we'll close this once we've tested the forum and the Open Collective as well. So for the forum, oh look, we've got some new folks. We'll open those up for our maintenance stuff, and we'll give that a little heart because that's that new job that we merged. Oh gosh, we're almost at the end of the hour. We may end up going a little bit longer on the stream, but I do kind of want to take a walk outside today. Otherwise, I'll become a mushroom attached to my chair. I added the Mastodon account into. I think we had a thread where social media was. Yeah, here we go. Open source design social media links. I think but I don't want to pin it because Meta. We've got the monthly open source design call pinned, And I think if we pin this, I don't know whether we can have like multiple pins. Topics currently pinned 2. What? There's not 2 things pinned. There's 1 thing pinned. I used to know how to use Discord and maintain discourse really well. I used to, as part of a product management role, like manage a discourse forum for the project, but like because I haven't done it for a while, select a time frame. So you have to, let's see what happens when we make it a banner topic. Oh, we don't want that. No, we don't want it like at the top of the everything. Do we? Oh, good grief. I suppose it actually might be really useful to make the open source design monthly call. Unpin topic. We don't want to unpin it. It would be quite nice to have our monthly call as like a banner. Okay, well let's not pin it. Maybe we'll see. Well, we'll see. Okay, so we pin the topic. If we remove banner topic. So I guess that can stay as a banner. It means that I removed it from my. Let's refresh and see whether it pops up. No, because cookies. We'll see how it goes. If anyone complains, then we can remove it. If they don't complain, they get to follow us on social media, I suppose. So hey, it's not really the end of the world, and we'll see what people think. We want to go to the Open Collective and see whether the Mastodon works there. Open Collective, and I think I had trouble trying to find where social media was defined in the settings for this, because good grief. There it is. So there, I managed to add it. It took me such a long time to find, like, if you manage an Open Collective and you have like the whole like dashboard, I'm pretty sure the documentation for like managing the dashboard is out of date. So it took me ages to figure out how to add the little Mastodon icon here. All of those are correct. Is this the correct email? Oh, cool. A contact form. Perfect. So, right, we can tested the links on the website, tested the links on the forum. They work. And I've also tested the link on the Open Collective. They work. It works. It works. So, there we go, and we can close that out. Oh, how about I assign it to me, because I did it. I did that. And then I was going to open up a new issue, which is about adding a form field for the license. Add a form field for open source software projects to paste a link to their active license for their projects. Let's do jobs form. Add a form field for so if an open source software project doesn't have a easy to access license, then we reject the PR for a job posting. It's become a sort of unofficial criteria for a job post. There are some exceptions where a project might not have a license or an appropriate license for the type of content may not exist. So we have had that in the past where I think a project wanted some support, and I can't remember what kind of open source project it was, but if I remember correctly, they didn't have a license. I don't even think they had they hosted things in a repository somewhere, but what they were an open project, they were openly accessible, they didn't have a license, and when we talked to them about, well, can you choose a license so that we can approve you to add the job, we had like this discussion about how no licenses felt like they were the appropriate kind of license for their project. So they definitely didn't feel comfortable just choosing a license just because, which is totally fair. These projects can be approved by like having a conversation with OSD maintainers to assure them they are following open source principles. But I suppose going back to like, you know, the focus of, say, this course for open source development methods, a lot of people wouldn't consider a project without an official license a open source project. It's like some people are that kind of cut and dry, whereas I think here in the open source design community we're a little bit nuanced, or maybe like most of the core team members in open source design have differing opinions, but I think we largely lean more lenient, essentially. So we tend to sort of do things like approve projects even if they maybe don't have a, what's the word, a license that is approved. So I think even this link that we use as like a it goes down there, yeah. So we use this as the link, the new operating system, as a link for like the definition. But if I remember correctly, when I was learning about different licenses, I was using, I think maybe it's possibly, there's a page on this website which is like, which are the approved licenses, I suppose. List of free software licenses, is it this one? Yeah, so it was this one. But it's like, it's for ones compatible with GNU, I think, so. Yeah. Oh, yeah, good point, yeah. So maybe the form field also needs to not just accept like one potential like license, so it needs to be like a bigger form field for multiple licenses. License or licenses. If a project has multiple licenses to address different types of work. yeah, so like for example, if you've got software and hardware, I think it's common that if there's like some kind of open source hardware as well as open source software, then they have different, you have to have different licenses. But yeah, there also may be like stuff that is very nuanced. I'd like to suggest we add a free text field to the job form, specifically asking a free text field, mandatory, so with the asterisks. A mandatory free text field to the jobs form, specifically asking for the job poster to share any public license documents there so we can review and approve. These like can be like text files in repos, or they can be like web pages, etc. We should be careful not to discriminate towards a like repo license. Cool. The classes where etc. We should be careful. So what conventions does the form fill? Project name, project. Let's say. So let's put the job form here. The code that needs changing. The public form page. Suggested copy. Form label should be project licenses. Free, like large. Yeah, so like one of these, a larger text box. And then we have in the box help, and we also have like the suggested text. So form like help text. We opens blah blah blah. Projects must have some kind of open source license, publicly viewable, so to be accepted. You can share any kind of online, like you can share any kind of document, e.g. like link to the license in your repo, a web page, text, like an online document, online cloud document. We only want to check that you are following open source principles. I think the help wording could be improved, but that's my best go right now to wording. Smiley face. Okay, right. Labels. Content. I don't think it's CSS. It's an enhancement. It's a good first issue. It's Jekyll stuff. It's job stuff. Yeah, okay, cool. There we go. Those are all the good labels. Do we want to put a milestone? Website redesign. Is the year this year 2024? It is, yeah, it's 2024 this year. Right, it's not website redesign, so we haven't got a milestone for it. Let's not assign myself, but let's open it up. Cool, so we don't want that anymore. Oh, actually we want this page, because I suppose we've gone all the way to the official end of the stream. Just doing some chat and maintenance. We got to talk a little bit about this course. I think maybe I'll finish off the stream instead of doing the jobs board maintenance. Which was the last job that the UX redesign? Ooh, was it that long ago? Oh gosh, yeah, I suppose like the last one was alt spaces, and then which was after alt spaces. So this one. Is it this one that is this one here? Let's have a little looky. No? Did this one get closed? Oh, it did. Was this a paid role? Gratis. No. Ugh. These are the people that we decided to give a warning to stop. So they closed it. I wonder if they got what they needed. But I suppose so that was the last one that got recorded. So this one, and this one need to be recorded in this. I also think there was one that Ura Design opened and closed that I didn't get in time, so we shall have to look upon the GitHub for that. The tricky thing with the GitHub is I know that everything is dated. Ah, here we go. So UX redesign was there. This one. Where's Tab Wrangler, Ura Figma plugin. Tab Wrangler, Ura Design. There we go. We'll grab that there. We'll pop that there just so that we've got the progression of dates, and that way we won't have missed anything. Because typically people aren't proactive with actually closing their their jobs posts on the open source design job. So Ura were incredibly proactive with actually closing their job post when they had enough like responses. But we shall probably do this these updates off stream, or maybe we'll save it for next stream next week. I don't know. We'll see. Open source tools for. Ooh. Oh wait. 4 years later. Oh, I love that. I love that. I love sometimes the open source design forum posts like can be opened in like 2019, have like conversation throughout 2019 and then maybe 2020, and then like 4 years later I've successfully run CritPad. Oh, that's great. Oh, that's really lovely to hear, isn't it, that they've been able to use CritPad. I reckon the folks from CritPad would want to know about that, to be honest. They're really lovely, the folks from CritPad. You know, not that my assessment of people's personalities should mean anything. Cool. We've welcomed some people. Hello. We're shifting our figures. Oh, cool. Looking forward to that. The other thing that I haven't done in a while, which is usually one of my maintenance tasks, I don't think I've done on stream since probably the very first stream, even though we're almost 10 minutes over stream at the moment, is open source design has a number of different teams, and we have, I believe, a Berlin team, which when people join the forum, I usually say, I love that other people are welcoming people into the forum now. For a while, I was the only person that was like, welcome to the forum. Welcome. Lovely to have you here and excited to hear about, what was he mentioning? Deeply involved in this project, user research. Ooh, awesome. Quick summary can be found in a minute. Sharing content. The user research work, and I'll try to find some time to delve into your documents. I use way too many emojis, I think. Although maybe people that know me can tell me whether I use way too many emojis. CritPads is decent, right? Like, so I don't know, like, features wise, I don't think that it's, you know, got any features that you can't typically find in any other sort of office suite stuff. Like, I hate that I default to like a Microsoft term for it when I actually, as part of this open source course, learned what the other name is for, I think something like text editor or like document preparing tools. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily do anything like revolutionary for it in terms of like new features for document preparation, but it's obviously like the thing about CritPad is that it's incredibly locked down, incredibly anonymous for changing things. Although I did find I used CritPad's version of a spreadsheet for a very high risk like project that we were doing over the last at my workplace for the last like 1.5-ish years, and I used it to try and like plan out a calendar schedule of like when certain things needed to be delivered, since it was like an incredibly high risk project. It couldn't we couldn't risk any information being stored in like any tools that were not like fully secure. And I did have a lot of trouble with just basic navigation in like quite a complicated long spreadsheet with the CritPad spreadsheets. But like, you know, you trade sometimes, shouldn't be this way, but sometimes you trade usability for security. I would like it to not be that way, but in most like current circumstances, you trade usability, reliability for like security, essentially. If you'd like to be added to a regional team, I can do so. We have teams. We have a team for Berlin. No pressure though. This is mostly so folks can see who else is like local to them in the open source design ecosystem. Glad you enjoyed FOSS Backstage design. I'm excited for it to hopefully happen again next year. I think FOSS Backstage announced a conference for last year, but I think we're still, in fact, I think there might be there's a thread for FOSS Backstage generally. And then some conversation about FOSS Backstage design. I mean, we'd love for it to happen. We, as in me, as in Errol, would love for the FOSS Backstage design to happen again. And we, as in speaking on behalf generally of my workplace Superbloom, would really like it to happen again. But we also are thinking about how that can be invested in. I highly recommend having lunch as well. Sadly, I have no real like edible food in the house, which is why after stream I was intending on leaving the house. But yeah, I suppose I'm gonna close out the stream maybe by like just quickly going through some of like the sections on this, and with specifically in relation to the open source software design curriculum that I started to build on stream last time I streamed. So generally the first section in the history part was really, really useful. I think that verbatim, or even like if I'm building like this curriculum that is a composite of different resources on the internet, I would like direct people to do this module as designers to just learn about the history of open source. It's pretty good. It's sort of, again, it has a slight more leaning towards like what you could describe as like traditional software development views of like open source. So I think that even in the quiz, it's possible that they ask you questions about why is it useful for developers to participate in open source, and it's there's something about like increases your job prospects. This quiz is really, really good. Here's the one where I got really confused about FreeBSD, like what FreeBSD and Linux kernel. Like I didn't actually know which ones were benevolent dictator, governing board, or company led. Well, I knew that Android was company led, and I felt like FreeBSD and Linux kernel are most likely not company led. But I didn't know which ones were benevolent dictator and which ones were governing board. In fact, I think I got it wrong on my first try. But this isn't the quiz that I was looking for. There was another quiz. That was why use open source software might have been the quiz that I found quite funny. Yeah. From a business perspective, not everyone's coming at open source from a business perspective, but anyway, from a business perspective, use of open source software lengthens time to market, but is worth because of like some of these answers are very from a particular perspective. Makes marketing easier as some ingredients are already well known and trusted. I think that one is. I think I chose that one. Whether or not it's correct or not, I can't quite remember. But technically, I would make marketing. If you were marketing your open source software or a non-open source software project that uses open source software, then it would make marketing more easier because some ingredients, some of the dependencies are maybe already well known and trusted. But I think with some, so one of my problems with some of these quiz questions is it's very dependent, right? So if you are using an open source as an ingredient to something that you're building or whatever, proprietary or open source otherwise, some open source would make it easier because it's already well known and trusted. But like, there's so much open source out there that isn't already well known. Yeah, and right. So exactly. Some of the answers, they made me laugh and smile because I was like, it depends. And then this one, open source is select all the answers that apply. I laugh because it's like, how could you even like begin to encapsulate open source is with like short statements, I suppose. But I think I remember I selected insecure as bad actors can easily see the code and hack it. And I think if I remember correctly, I don't think that's the correct answer. But like, it's not insecure because bad actors can easily see the code and hack it, but it does potentially make you more vulnerable to people that want to look for things that have vulnerabilities. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's insecure by default, if you know what I mean. And like, I think this last one was the one that makes more sense, secure or insecure, depending on the quality. Insecure because no one is in charge of security. I think I really wanted to like select that one because like my experience of like people that look after the security of open source is dubious, if not. Yeah, it's a poor question. Maybe actually the benefit of the question isn't necessarily to have correct answers, but maybe the benefit of the question is to get you thinking about this, like, and like, so if that is the intention, I'm like, oh, then it's a good question to pose, like make up your own minds about like what is open source and have a think about like these different things that are very dependent on lots of different factors. But obviously it's not presented as such because there are correct and incorrect answers to this quiz and whether you progress or not. So if the question was more framed in like the open source might be a series of statements, what are your thoughts and opinions on these series of statements? And to give the course a little bit more credit where credit's due, there are these sections where like they provoke discussion. But there's very few people that have done the discussion parts, but then again, it's a free course and like, you know, whatever. But it's nice that there are like sections which is like, what do you use day to day? But they don't, I guess like a few of the questions didn't feel like they were really like digging into some of the nuanced parts of open source. But that was just like the first module. Can I go to the next? Oh, Coursera, your interface is garbaggio in so many ways. Let's just, you know, go module 2. Yeah, there we go. So this was interesting. I found this section really interesting, and I think this is where a section would not be applicable to a design curriculum, because this section was like, I really want to show you all the quiz for this one because it made me like go. It kind of made me chuckle again, but it's like tips for successful contribution, and I think that in and of itself, that sort of statement suggests that there is a right and a wrong way to make contributions. And I suppose, again, you can kind of think about it in terms of like there is functional and non-functional code contributions. So there's code contributions that fix the problem and code contributions that don't quite fix the problem, that need adapting and changing or not. But it's a whole video about it, and then if we look at the quiz, we might get like a sense of like what is taught essentially in the videos. So this one I got wrong, I believe. So this is obviously where my experience as a designer differs from potential experiences as software developers. So when first getting involved in an open source software project, you should start by posting messages on the appropriate mailing list, suggesting things you would like to see, pointing out the weak aspects of the project. Now, I agree with some of that statement, but not all of that statement. Like, I would start posting messages on the appropriate mailing lists. I would suggest things that I would like to see, or like things that I think could be improvements based off of my like knowledge as like a user researcher designer. I wouldn't necessarily point out the weak aspects of the project unless it was like provoked or asked for, if there was an issue to do with that or I was asked. There's the consider what it is you would like to work on, either because it is needed by you, as in, I guess you're using the open source and it's got something. Start by reading messages first, right. But I guess like the question is like when you're first getting involved. Like, so I guess like maybe there's some nuance there between like, what's the first thing that you should do in order to like better understand an open source project? Read messages, understand the project, understand where the gaps are, understand the methods of communication, understand like from that kind of information where the most successful places might be for like integrating into a project, or even if it's possible. And then when you're involved, like if I wanted to become involved, the first thing that I would do is say hello somewhere that feels appropriate. Hello, I'm a designer. I'm interested in doing these kinds of things. I've noticed X, Y, and Z could be improved, but I either see some issues or I don't see some issues. How would this, be received essentially? Or can I do these things? Or how would you all like me to proceed with doing these contributions? But yeah, I agree. Like the first thing is what is successful by some measures, change the software so it fixes one thing that affects me. Yeah, for sure. That is definitely a way of like describing success. And I think that this quiz is obviously like from like that development perspective, which, so like this second answer, the consider what it is you would like to work on, either because it is needed by you or interests you, it feels like an example of that, i.e. like this open source project that I use regularly, it hasn't got something that I need it, or it doesn't do something that I need it to do for the reasons that I need it to do it. The typical like structure there would be raise a bug request or like raise a bug or raise an issue and then solve the issue yourself with appropriate PR. And then maybe even use the version that you've changed yourself until there's an update, right? But anyway, so that I believe is a correct answer, if I remember correctly, but I'm not. Start contributing code immediately and learn the workflow through doing. I kind of laughed at like the idea of like, I want to contribute code immediately. Start by helping test and report results. And I think like my instincts were to select this one and this one, because I think if I remember correctly, the consider what it is you'd like to work on, either because it is needed by you or just interests you, that is rarely the case for a designer. You're not going to be contributing something that improves the open source software's use. It's very rare that the designer is also using the open source software, or maybe it isn't as rare, but like those are specific circumstances where like a designer is like maybe using an open source software that like isn't a design open source software. They're using it for some other thing. So for example, I've like mentored designers that use open source music software for their hobby for music, and they want to contribute design that improves the software, the open source software, because they use it for their music, which would be another example of how a designer could select this one. But I find in my experience, designers don't often work on an open source software and contribute to it because it's something they need. It's something that they like want to see improve for people, users generally. But anyway. So anyway, the quizzes were interesting, but I think that this is obviously like this whole module would need complete like redoing from a design perspective. Yes, we touched on it some other thread. Yeah, contributing to increase your social capital and become part of the community is a different motivation to contribute, for sure. Yeah, so I guess like one of the things that I would add to this course, like that's completely missing actually, is why are you interested in open source software? Like in the first module it says, do you work on or contribute to projects already? But I feel like one of the first things that could be explored is like testimonials about why like developers or designers or anybody is involved in open source software, and have like differing perspectives about what is the why, what are the benefits, or like if there's actually no benefits, then have somebody come in and talk about something that they maintain that they don't necessarily enjoy but they maintain for another reason. So like I feel like this whole course was very much missing like the introspective, like reflective, like why are you interested in doing this? Because this feels like perhaps a course that is like you have some work incentive to contribute to open source software, and maybe that work incentive is to be hired, but like that is a motivator, right? And they do, I think there is one quiz that talks about that. But if you're, then largely the quiz goes into like governance and licensing. The licensing section I think would be really useful for designers to understand like nuances between licenses. I actually don't think the licensing section goes deep enough into licenses, which is hilarious from, I suppose, a non-code perspective, that I've become really interested in licenses, I suppose, over the last like year and a half. But there's like this whole section on non-responsive maintainers and what you should do. And there's a really funny like quiz answer, which is something like the maintainer isn't merging your PR, or doesn't merge your PR and merges a different one instead of your PR that does a similar function or something like that. And like one of the options that you can choose is comment on the new PR that got merged and like ask why your one wasn't merged, and like list the merits that your one had versus the new. I don't know, it sort of seemed like I read it and I was like, oh my god, sometimes this sounds exhausting as like a thought experiment to me, but like the actuality of it, I can't even imagine like how exhausting it must be to like participate in that kind of drama. But to round out, because we'll be at like an hour and a half of this hour long stream in a moment. But there was a whole section that I don't know why it's in this course. It's all about like continuous integration, which I found interesting because I don't know a lot of deep like knowledge about continuous integration and those kinds of things, and like why. But I sort of like question mark whether this would be useful for designers. I imagine like some of this content would be still useful to include in like a curriculum for designers contributing to open source, but only if it also included content about typical documented processes in open source projects. So I know that there's no standard way that open source projects like do their processes. Like not every open source project requires you to open issues before fixing something. Not every open source software will follow like sprint methodology or even any methodology. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like the thing that would be missing from the design related curriculum around like the topic of that could be included within a topic to do with like continuous integration would be examples of how some open source software processes work, so that, because I think that when you're maybe a software developer coming to like this content, there may already likely be like an understanding of the varied processes that can be done in software development, whereas from the design perspective, unless you've got experience of that, you're not going to have the background information. So anyway, but then there's the whole section about the licenses and legal issues, patents and all of that kind of stuff, combining licenses. I found that section of the course the most interesting and valuable. There was I remember off the top of my head, in the section to do with licenses that I found interesting, because I had a different experience of this, is like there's a section where they really try and like push that an open source project should try not to change a license ever, really. Like, you select a license and you stick to that license. And it made it really, the course content made it seem like it's really scary, really difficult, and very much like a bad thing to do if you decide to try and change your license. And don't get me wrong, it's non-trivial, like, to try and change a license, especially if it's a very established project. But like, my experiences have been a little bit more like, well, if your license isn't necessarily working for you and you want to change it, then it is a process that can be done, and here is how it can be done. It mostly, like, so I guess like my problem with that section of the licensing course content was it didn't propose that as an alternative. Oh yeah, I agree, CB. Like, yeah, so like, I think there might have been a option that you could select, which was like work on the new like merged branch of the PR, or work on the new version of the software in order to continue to improve that. Yeah, which makes sense. But I guess it's like some of this course content kind of really, what's the word? I think unintentionally reinforced some of the like difficult social aspects of building software, and it was interesting to see it presented in like an course academic learning format. Yeah, interesting, right? So interesting in the very British way of saying interesting, like interesting, and which equals potentially problematic, potentially incredibly nuanced, potentially useful, but also potentially missing a lot of vital information. Like, that's a rough translation of when a British person says interesting. Anyway, there we go. That was the last sort of one of the last things that I wanted to try and do on stream. I still really encourage anyone to go do this course. I think it's worth it if you've got the spare time. And then the one thing that we didn't get to do is do any populating of this repo, but hey, we weren't expecting to be honest. We were ambitious with 3 different things to potentially do, even though I figured that my maintenance load was fairly light this week. But anyway, folks, I'm going to end the stream here at a little over half an hour later than expected for an hour-long stream. But thanks to the folks that have joined me. I'm going to come off of screen share now, and as always, you can catch the recordings of these over on my YouTube channel, which pretty much get uploaded immediately after a stream. Thanks for joining me, and yeah, hopefully next time we'll have some more interesting open source stuff to talk about, as always. Bye bye, folks. Enjoy lunches, enjoy the rest of your Tuesdays.